Hi, I'm Kristen and this is Scrap Fabric Love, and today's video is the introduction kickoff to the Scrappy Side Quests Quilt Along. What's a side quest, you might ask? Don't worry, I'm going to get to that. But before I do, if you haven't been to my channel before, you've not done one of my Quilt Alongs, let me just tell you how they work. So I've done these about 2 a year on my channel for quite a while now. And all of my Quilt Alongs are aimed at helping you use the fabric you already have in your sewing room, growing your confidence in your creativity and your ability to make choices in your quilting, and slightly trying to prove that scrap quilts can look modern. So here are some examples of previous Quilt Alongs that we've done on the channel. And this is the mock-up for this Scrappy Side Quest Quilt Along. I've got lots of graphics to show you in a few minutes with different color options and all that good stuff. But just as a general overview of what the Quilt Along is going to be, the quilt is 66 by 72 inches. The Quilt Along is going to last for 2 months, and it's going to consist of 3 main quilt blocks that I'm going to do separate video tutorials for. There's going to be quick finish side quests. I'll explain more about that in a minute. And there's going to be an optional, put your own stamp on it, make this quilt completely your own, optional bonus quest at the end. And of course, some scrappy prizes. And the patterns for the Quilt Alongs are not in my Etsy shop. They're only inside Scrap Club. So Scrap Club is my beginner-friendly, judgment-free online quilt community. It's hosted on Patreon, and all of the PDFs, templates, patterns, videos, everything live inside Scrap Club. We also do live sewing Q&A sessions during the Quilt Along, so that if you've got questions, that happens inside too. So if you wanted to just join us for the Quilt Along and then leave when it's done, you can absolutely do that. But I hope that if you join us inside, you might fall in love with the people and just want to stay with us. So feel free to dip in and give it a try just for this Quilt Along if you fancy. So this Quilt Along is going to happen over 2 months. So it's going to be February and March here on the channel. And every other week, so every 2 weeks, however you want to say that, there's going to be a Quilt Along video. I'll still have other videos on the channel if you're just looking for something to watch while you sew, but if you're following along live, we're starting today, which is the 3rd of February 2026, with the intro and the fabric pull and me explaining what a side quest is and all of that stuff and what the quilt looks like. And then every 2 weeks, I'll be adding the next building block for your quilt. The other 2 things you need to know about my Quilt Alongs that are always true is that I encourage you to make this a no-buy Quilt Along. So unless you're a beginner and you have 0 fabric in your home, and you can absolutely make this quilt if you're a beginner, but unless that's you, I want you to shop your stash, shop your scraps. This is designed for using up your leftover bits. And the reason we can do that is because the other thing that my Quilt Alongs always are is scrappy. So when I talk about a background color, or an accent fabric, which is how I tend to talk about the different elements of the quilt, I'm talking about a bundle of fabrics that are roughly the same color. It's not the same fabric, not the same print. They could be solids, they could be prints, they could be a mix. But if they kind of in a pile look like they're purple, we use them all as our purple, if we've got purple in our quilt, right? So for example, I'll show you some of the past Quilt Along quilts where I've used white as a background. It's not all the same white. Where I've used black as a background, same idea. So this is designed for you to be able to pull out those things you just have a little bit left of, maybe from a fat quarter or from a bit of yardage, and you can put it all together and it can be your background or your accent or whatever we're going to do with it. So it's just a fun way of making your fabric go further. I'm going to show you all the lovely color options for the quilt in a minute. But first of all, what is a side quest? Right, so I've got this language from my sons. So they play video games, and in video games, there's often little side quests, things you can do in the game that you don't have to do, but you can do, and they're kind of fun. Maybe you get something extra sometimes, something that helps you in the game. And then at the end of some of the games that they play, there's like a bonus quest. So like they finished the game, it's all done, they've done everything you're supposed to do, but then they can go and do this other thing. Again, it's optional, but they always enjoy doing it. So this Quilt Along is going to have that. So the quilt is made up of 3 blocks and some negative space and background fabric. And for each of the 3 blocks, I'm going to give you a side quest or if it helps you to think of it differently, an off-ramp. Depends where you are, right? So maybe you're someone who signs up for too many quilt alongs and you don't always finish them. So if that's you, the idea is that you can make the blocks for the week, and if you don't end up making the quilt along, come back to my video, do the side quest, and you're going to have a finished smaller project. So there's going to be cushions, there's going to be a table runner, and there's going to be zipper pouches. Those are going to be your side quests for the blocks if you choose not to go all the way and finish it as a quilt top. But of course, if you are one of the folk who always make extra blocks when you do a quilt along, then the side quests are not so much your off-ramp, they are an optional added side quest. So you can do them as well as doing the blocks for the quilt. So it's a bit of choose your own adventure, which folk in my scrap club will know I kind of like the idea of. So, and for those eager beavers who've done all the side quests and they still want to do something extra when they finish the quilt top, there's a bonus quest where you can use your own creative muscles and add something a bit extra. So I'm going to explain again what that's going to look like as well. I've got graphics and all sorts of things to show you. So anyway, let me open up my computer, share my screen with you, and hopefully I can make it all make sense. Okay, so here is a mock-up that I've done on my computer. Don't worry about the colors. These were just the colors I randomly selected. They're not even the ones I'm going to use. So there's basically 3 groups of fabric in this quilt. So the white here, which as I said could be lots of different whites, is your primary background fabric. That's what I'm calling it. The blue here, the dark blue, I'm calling it a secondary background fabric. And again, I know it looks uniform in this mock-up, but this could be lots of different blues of a similar shade. And then the yellows and the pinks are our accent fabrics. So let me show you another variation on this. So here it is where we don't have a separate secondary background color. So all of the background is made up of whites. So the accent colors pop a bit more, it maybe looks a little bit more modern, and you don't get that framing effect that we had before with the blue. Here is one that illustrates better what I'm talking about with a bunch of different blues. So this is the same general idea as that one where we don't really have a secondary background color, but I've got a mix of blues. So this was me mocking it up in case I choose to use denim for my quilt, because I make a lot of jean quilts. I'm going to show you my fabric pull later in the video, but the more similar the fabrics you use for your background are, the more modern it's going to look. And the more contrast you have between the background and your accent fabric, the more minimal it's going to look. So you can make it look busier or cleaner depending on the fabrics you choose, if that makes sense. So you'll see in the mock-ups that the background is made up of squares, similar to my Scrapagon quilt pattern, if you've seen that or you've done that one. But if you're in Scrap Club, you will also get measurements to do the primary background in sort of larger strips and bits. So if you don't want to cut it up into the smaller squares, you don't have to. The idea of using a background made up of all these squares is so that you can use up, as I said, the smaller bits of like a leftover corner of a fat quarter or something like that. And you can kind of pull bits that seem too small for anything together and make them your background. So if that's what you're trying to do, just use up scraps, go with the squares. If you're someone who just has a stash full of a whole lot of yardage, don't worry, I will give you the longer cuts for the background. Right. Here is another illustration using a darker background and brighter accent fabric, so you can kind of see how if you don't have that secondary background color, what you're going to focus on is the accents, and it is probably going to look a little bit more minimal. And here is even more minimal again if you like a 2-color kind of thing. Here's navy blue and all of the accents are white. I'm kind of toying with this for mine, except my navy blue might be denim, but I haven't decided yet. And of course, there's always a rainbow option. Again, if you see my channel before, I almost always make a rainbow version of my quilt alongs, but I am committing to myself this time. Guys, hold me to it. I'm only making one version of my quilt this time. I'm going to do the side quests. That's going to be my extra, but I'm not, if you've watched the channel before, I tend to make 2 of every quilt along quilt, and it's just too much. So I'm going to make 1, and then I'm going to do my side quests. Anyway, so this one is, you see your accent fabrics could be all sorts of colors. It doesn't have to be rainbow. It could be just so super scrappy, but by using a kind of minimal background, it's going to make that less busy and easier to look at. And here is the same again, but we are using that secondary background fabric which is the black here, so that you get this idea of these orange peel blocks and these wonky strip blocks kind of sitting on a square almost, if that makes sense. So I like both of the looks. There's no wrong way, but again, if you've seen my quilt alongs, I like to give you guys options. And I always think that a quilt pattern, even the ones that I write, are just a suggestion. It's just an idea, and it's for you to kind of riff off and play with. So as you can see, there's lots of ways you could change this up. One thing I didn't mock up, which I often do, is alternate layouts. So if you've gotten as far as making the blocks and you don't like my layout, I think you can probably have fun moving things around and making it different. And if you need help with that, again, that's what the live sessions inside Scrap Club are for. Right, so here are the 3 blocks that the quilt is made up of. So we've got the orange peel blocks, the wonky stripes block, and the confetti block. This week, as I said, is the intro and the fabric pull. Next week is the orange peel block. And full disclosure with this one, this wasn't what I intended it to look like. When I was designing this quilt in my head and drawing it on a piece of paper, I was drawing my double orange peel quilt block. So if you've seen those videos, I made a quilt several years ago. It was denim and scraps, and it had 2 orange peels that kind of overlapped each other. And so my idea was that that was what was going to go in this sort of strip on the quilt. But the software that I used to mock up my quilts, I just couldn't figure out how to do the mock-up of the 2. So I just popped in a regular orange peel block. And actually, I like how it looks. So when we get to this week of the quilt along, which is in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to give you both options. So if you're in Scrap Club, you'll get templates for both sizes of orange peel, and I'll show you the difference. But it's basically the same technique. It's just 2 or 1. So there's your first choice you have to make after you've chosen your fabric colors. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to do the wonky stripes block. And for that one, there's going to be 2 ways you can do it. I'm going to show you a quick strip piecing way, sort of improv style strip piecing. And inside Scrap Club, there's going to be a foundation paper piecing option, because I know some of you just love that. So that'll be inside. Then 2 weeks after that, so the 3rd block will be the confetti block. And again, I'll have a quicker strip set method. And if you're in Scrap Club, you'll get an FPP version if that's something you want. Okay. And the side quests are going to come out the same time as the block tutorial. So the video for 2 weeks time is I'm going to show you how you make the orange peel blocks. And then I'm going to show you how you make the cushion, and you'll get the how-to sheet for the side quest inside Scrap Club as well. So orange peel blocks, going to be cushions. The wonky stripes block, we're making a table runner with those. And the confetti block, if you've got extra blocks or you don't finish the quilt along, we're going to make zipper pouches. So again, those are totally optional. You don't have to do the side quests at all. You can just finish your quilt and completely ignore and tune out those bits, or they can be little extras that you do as well if you want to. Lastly, the bonus quest. So if you finish your quilt top, you do those 3 blocks, there's going to be a construction week on the channel. So we'll put together your quilt top. You'll have this modern, I hope, fun quilt top that you love. But if you're the sort of person who likes to go that bit extra and put your own stamp on things, the bonus quest is where you can just go wild, okay? So you can add anything. You can add applique, EPP shapes, yo-yos, words, buttons, embellishments, orphan blocks, panels. Let me show you what I mean, because that sounds bonkers, right? Okay. If anybody has seen my 2 quilts that I've put in the Festival of Quilts over the past few years, one's called Wasted on the Young and one's called Overgrown. I like to play with appliquing all sorts of like flowers and shapes and things to kind of look like things are exploding off the quilt. That's kind of about like how we just have this abundance of fabric and thoughts and everything. That's the kind of idea with that. But anyway, this is my mock-up of how you would do something kind of like that with this quilt. And don't get hung up on the exact graphics, because it was just to give you an idea of where you could place things. And if you're in Scrap Club, I'll give you some kind of botanical templates that you can use for this if you want to. But of course, you could just do your own thing. Maybe you've got some sort of a flower template or a leaf shape that you already own, because we all have too many templates, right? And I'll talk through how we would how you could do this and think about it in that week. Here's another option that got a really good reaction when I showed it inside Scrap Club. If you have leftover EPP hexagons that maybe you've basted, but you haven't actually sewn together and you don't have a project for them, you could choose some in your accent colors and place them on the quilt. So that's an option. Someone else in Scrap Club asked me how to use up a whole bunch of yo-yos. If you've seen fabric yo-yos, but I'll show a picture on the screen of what a yo-yo is. So here is an idea of how you could kind of put those over the quilt in a fun way. And if you don't like this kind of organic looking thing, you could also make them very uniform and just fill that space in the middle. And that's where I mean when I'm talking about like having maybe a panel or orphan blocks or anything like that, you could fill that square in the center with something else. So I will give you like the measurement for that square and the seam allowances when we get to construction week, so that you can decide if you want that square to be something else entirely to what I've got there, which is currently just a blank space, right? And you could also make it a protest quilt. You could put words on it. You could make it a memory quilt. This could be people's names. All sorts of options and things you could do. Or you could just ignore the bonus quest completely. Finish your quilt top and we'll quilt it up. And I'll show you how I quilt mine and give you some ideas for that as well when we get later on in the quilt along. Okay, so fabric pull. You might not believe me, but when I introduced this quilt to the members of my scrap club last week, I didn't know what fabrics I was going to use. I still don't. And that's because I don't think I have to have a hard and fast plan before I start making something for it to turn out well. That's my process. I like to go with it, see what things look like, pivot, change my mind. So although you might get instructions for the fabric you need for the quilt inside the PDFs in Scrap Club, I personally don't cut things out ahead of time. I do one bit at a time so that I can always pivot. So today I'm going to pull out a bunch of fabric options. I kind of need to visually see them sitting next to each other to see what I think. But the only two things I really need to decide on are what's my secondary background fabric going to be. That's the one that makes up kind of the square in the mock-up. And what are my accent fabrics going to be? Because those are the ones that make up the actual quilt blocks that we're going to do in the tutorial videos. The rest of it, the primary background fabric, we can swap out whenever, right? We could change our mind at the very last minute before we put it all together. So I can have an idea what I want to use for that. But if by the time I make the blocks, I don't like that background anymore, I can swap it out and change it. I can decide to have it have more contrast with the secondary background, or I can decide to use more of the secondary background fabric and lose that square shape completely, right? That's what all the options are for. And of course, if you get to that stage, you've made all the blocks and you just can't find a background that you like and you don't want to put the quilt together, you do the side quests, you do the small finishes, and you're done. So I'm going to pull out some options for my quilt. So the first thing I did was pull out my stash of denim. So I've got one that's like jeans I've already cut into, and another one of just like the jeans my husband has passed on to me. And in the one that was cut, I actually found a bunch of denim squares. Some of them were too small for this quilt, and some of them were a bit on the big side, but obviously you can cut those down. So I kind of separated them out to see how many I had of the kind of different denim colors. But don't get stressed out by seeing the denim. This quilt is not a jean quilt necessarily. I just use denim for any old quilt that I want to make often. So you can absolutely use cotton, and I will use some quilting cotton in this quilt as well. And at this point, I haven't even decided if the denim's going in. So don't stress that you're seeing me pull out fabrics that maybe you wouldn't normally pull for a quilt. That's just the kind of thing I like to do. So the first idea I was playing with was using the darker denim, which I have a lot of, as the primary background, and maybe that light denim as the secondary background. And then accents, I was kind of thinking of going minimal, like whites and creams and things. But when I tried laying out the different colors, I just couldn't see the contrast between the light and the dark denim, so I scrapped that. These are some dark corduroy trousers that I was kind of testing out with some white and cream crumb block pieces that I could use for an accent potentially. And then I looked back in the denim and found these orange and coral jeans. And I was like, maybe. So my first instinct had been to go more minimal and monotone with this quilt, but I am a sucker for bright colors. So I did quite like how these jeans look, and I've had them for a while and not known what to use them for. I think I thrifted them for their color. And so then I found this piece of it's like a fat quarter with these stripes with the different colors. I found some orange corduroy, some pink velvet. I know these feel like random fabrics, but all of this could be cotton as well. And then I tested out some white fabrics against those colors in case I want to ditch the blue denim altogether and have like white be the primary background and use these kind of oranges and coral colors as my secondary background. So this is my initial fabric pull. The idea is that the pile of denim is the primary background. The pile of kind of oranges, pinks, corals that kind of correlate with that one stripy fat quarter might be my secondary background fabric, and then the crumb-pieced whites would be my accents. But if you actually look at the instructions that I've written for the quilt, it's 2 or 3 colors for the accent. So actually the orange coral pile looks more like that accent fabric, and maybe I could pull more whites and creams as the secondary background fabric. So I could swap those two. I'm going to have a think about that and decide what I want to do there. But either way, I think I kind of like this color combination. So please don't get stressed about the fact that I'm using denim, that I've got corduroy and velvet and random fabrics. You can absolutely pull from your quilting cotton stash and make this quilt. I just sometimes like to use reclaimed fabrics. It's just something I enjoy, but it's not a requirement for this quilt. And also don't get stressed out about the fact that these are just random piles and I've not measured it. So if you're in Scrap Club, you will get a PDF with yardage estimates. You will get exact cutting instructions when we come to the quilt blocks. Okay, you're not going to be left hanging not knowing how much fabric you need. But this is genuinely how I prepare for a quilt. So I kind of know in my head how big the quilt is, and I'm thinking this is probably too much for the primary background, but it's definitely enough. This, I think, would work definitely for the accent. Probably for the secondary background, I'd have enough. This, it would be enough if it was just the accent, probably, but if I'm going to use it for the secondary background, I'm going to need to go digging in my low volume white stash, but that's fine because I know I have plenty of that, so I don't need to take it out and measure it completely. This is how I kind of guess and start working. But obviously you do what works for you, and if you need those fabric requirements, don't worry, you're going to get them. So these are the release dates for the videos that are part of the Quilt Along, running all the way to the 31st of March. Plus there's the 2 Quilt Along Sit and Sew Q&A sessions inside Scrap Club. And then if I get enough photos from members and folk taking part, I might do an extra video just to show you all what folk have made. But if I don't end up making that video, you'll see those images all inside Scrap Club in the chat. One of the things I like about having Scrap Club now is when I finish a quilt along, even if folk are still working on it, I get to see the photos at the end, even if it's like months in the future. So that's always nice. Did I mention there are prizes? There are. So just like last time, this is not a sponsored quilt along. There's no fat quarter bundles, but there's going to be scrappy prizes. So I'm going to fill this box, which is just like an upcycled packaging box, empty now, but I can fit a lot of fabric and fun notions and little things in there. So this is the grand prize size. And then I'm going to fill this smaller box. Yes, I'm recycling it from my coffee subscription. No, I'm not sponsored, but London Nootropics, if you want to sponsor me, please get in touch. Anyway, and I can fit more than you think in here. So this is the kind of runner-up prize. This is the grand big old prize. And all you have to do to be in with a chance to win is to be in Scrap Club and to post at least one photo of any progress in the quilt along. You don't have to finish the quilt. You don't even have to finish a block. Your photo could be of your fabric pull. I'm going to be making a list of names and I'm going to spin it on a fun wheel in a live draw inside Scrap Club on Patreon. So I hope that sounds like fun to some of you. Obviously you can tell I'm excited about it. So if you want to take part, get all of PDFs, downloads, and the live sessions, please join me inside Scrap Club. The link is in the video description box, but also welcome to all of you who just want to watch along and follow along for the ride. We're happy to have you with us as well. If you're new to the channel, I make scrap quilts. I don't follow a lot of quilting rules. I always give you guys tons of options and I expect you to make your own choices. And if you like that sort of thing, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.